Okay. Jnanatimidandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakshudunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyaiva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha Namo Mahabhadanjaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha Vande Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahadito Godadaya Pushpavantu Chitra Sanghotamonudam Jayatam Suratopan Gurmamamandamatir Gati Matsarvasya Padam Bhojo Radhamadana Mohanam Divyat Brindaranya Kalpadrumata Srimat Ratnagara Simhasanastu Shriman Radha Srila Govinda Deva Prasthali Visibhyamanushmarami Srimam Rasa Rasarambi Bam Sivata Tatashtitaha Karshan Venusanair Gopir Gopinata Shriyastanaha Rasa Ghanna Mohanamurtim Vichitra Kilimahotsavolasitam Radha Charana Viloditam Ruchira Srikhandam Harim Bande Vrindavaneshwari Tavaiva Padarvindam Premamritaikamakaranda Rasogapurnam Vidyarpita Madhupatir Smaratapamogram Nirbhapayat Paramashitalamashrayami Bhaktya Vihinaya Paradhalakshay Shiktasthakamaditarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanam Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Swastyastu Vishvashakalo Prashidatam Dhyayantu Bhutan Shivanmito Diya Manashcha Bhadram Bhajatada Dukshaye Abhishitam no Matirapiya Haitaki Shri Sachinandan Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Gaudiya Vaishnav Guru Parampara Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Hari. So, pranams all of you. Welcome to those who have just connected. And I'm very happy, honored, blessed to be yet one more time. Krishna is giving us another opportunity to be together, to learn from one another. Bodhayanta parashparam katayantas chamam nityam tusyanti charamanti cha. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, my devotees like to hang out with one another, and in that hanging out they enlighten one another. It's a mutual enlightening process. No, it's not just a unidirectional enlightening. Enlightenment is a mutual phenomenon. Like love is always reciprocal, so enlightenment is always mutual. It's a two-way street. We are interrelated, so there's always something happening in both directions, and more than both. There are only not two directions, right? So greetings from Berlin, as I was telling some of you before we officially started our meeting today. I'm in a festival this weekend called Bhakti Bloom. I like the expression, the flourishing of love, of adoration. Last days I've been more contemplating this word. No? Worship sounds a little bit more formal and distant. Adoration is more related to this idea of something being adorable, right? Something being very close to our hearts, very intimate. So, bhakti bloom, the blossoming of adoration. So it's pretty far, so far, very interesting experience. A few hundreds people here. The main theme of the gathering, as I was telling you, is sambandha, relationship, interconnectedness, and not only how to relate, but awakening to the reality that we are already in relationship. We cannot exist outside of relationship. We are relational beings. The nature of reality is relational. It's an ongoing dialogue. The nature of reality, we could say, is dialogical. Everything is in conversation with everything else. We just need to tune in, right? We just need to hone our hearing capacities, Shravanam. That's why it all begins with Shravanam, right? With hearing, listening, paying close attention to the ongoing dialogue between God, soul, river, tree, birds, atoms. There's so much happening, so much going on. But we need to, of course, slow down, pay attention, and plug in, tune in with the dialogical nature of reality. So that's the underlying thread. These days, there are different presentations and kirtan and performances and therapies and different disciplines. Rasang is asking me where I am exactly. So I'm exactly in a room inside a palace, inside a castle, to be more precise. Castle. I learned today that, yeah, in English, you don't pronounce the T when you say castillo, which will be in Espanol, in Spanish, castle. So I'm in a castle. It's a very interesting experience. I've never been in a castle in my life. I mean, maybe I visited the castle for a few minutes someday. If I can recall, but not having a room there and spending the night that. So I'm taking my understanding of renunciation to another level by staying in a castle as a monk. So that's an interesting invitation to apply yukta vairagya, or proper renunciation, proper relationship with everything. But it's nice, beautiful place. It's an hour from the center of Berlin, Brasangi, Germany. We've been, before this, as you recall, last week we were in Austria with Mayapur Sangam and her crew and some other friends that came. So we had a beautiful retreat there. You were part of that one day when we did that last satsang. So that was a very fulfilling time. And again, the experience now overflows in its own flavor and mood here in Germany. I'll be here till Monday, and then we'll have 3 more days of other meetings outside of this particular property nearby the area. So yeah, eventually we may be able to share some of those sharings. So far, they have been. Today I gave a presentation on self-love and divine love in the context of Sambandha, the main theme. We had a very nice gathering. It was filmed. I don't have the material yet, but eventually we hope to share all that in my YouTube channel. So looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to share with all of you today. I already see 3 raised hands, so I don't want to take much more of your time. And of course, I invite anyone else from you who may have anything to bring today to our conversation table sharing. You can raise your digital hand. And we will begin with the first one, which is Mayapur Sangam. So you can please unmute yourself and bring your offering to the circle.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
I
Krishna.
have a question according a shloka of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it says, in this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden: the offering of a horse in sacrifice, the offering of a cow in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of sannyas,
Yes.
the offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and the man's begetting children in his brother's wife. But my question is how to understand the acceptance of the order of sannyas is forbidden in this age of Kali, because
I'm a sannyasi, right? So what I'm
yes,
doing,
you are a sannyasi, but I was thinking then maybe in Kali-yuga our main yagya is the Sankirtan yagna. Maybe it's the emphasis to focus more on that and not put so much intention on the other. That was my conclusion, but is it only this understanding, or how can we understand that worse?
Yeah, thank you for that. So how to understand this verse? Actually, it's not from Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's originally from other Shastra. Chaitanya Charitamrita quotes a lot of verses from different scriptures, right? So this one, I'm not sure now. I think it comes from one of the Puranas. I don't have the exact reference in my mind now. But yeah, it mentions 5 things which are forbidden in Kali-yuga, and one of them, and I knew you were going to that one of the 5, the acceptance of sannyas. So basically the criteria, a few things we can say. First thing, some commentators will say there are different types of sannyas. There's not only one single thing, and one of these are called karma sannyas, which means the renunciation of all action. No, where some people just basically stop acting, as impossible as it may sound, again, to some of us in this age, and that's why specifically that's not recommended for this age, because we cannot even conceive that such a thing is possible, right? Like just stop doing stuff and just sit and meditate and just depend on Krishna. So by the dynamics of the current age, it's considered that that form of sannyas is not basically possible and therefore not recommended. Karma sannyas, that's called. Sannyas means, in one sense, to utterly reject something. So karma means action. So karma sannyas means renunciation of action, stopping to act. So that's the specific, according to some commentators, to which type of sannyas this particular verse we're quoting is referring to. So that will be the main answer, I would say. It's not that all forms of sannyas are forbidden in Kali-yuga, but of course we can also extend the reading of this verse to not necessarily also, okay, the first one is like forbidden, but also by forbidden is, the spirit of the forbiddance is more like not recommended, because you can still try to do it, but generally it may not be sustainable. So I will say that even beyond karma sannyas, in general, the order of sannyas is not recommended in the age of Kali. No? In the sense of it may not be sustainable for most people. And again, we are not saying with this that those who are sannyas are higher than those who are not, because we can easily fall into those hierarchies, right? But just it's a particular nature, it's a particular way of living life, whether you embrace that order as a young person or embrace it eventually. So yeah, it is generally considered that most people, by contrast with other ages, from what we read in the scripture, that was more natural, more sustainable. So I will say that mostly the idea, the spirit of the verses, besides what I already said, do not rush into being a renunciant if you don't have the vocation for that. No, that would be the, apart from the explanation I gave for karma sannyas, which is the main reading of that verse. But I will add as a footnote this, because also we see that, okay, I'm not accepting karma sannyas, I'm not renouncing all action, I'm accepting Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyas, which involves we are given a danda when we accept sannyas, which includes mind, body, and word, thoughts, and deeds, actions in the service of Bhagavan. So action is one of those dandas, the 3 dandas. So action is included. We are not rejecting action. But still, for many people, even though you try to engage action, words, and thoughts in Krishna's service, it may be difficult for some of them to sustain the vows, as we have seen throughout our relatively short history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, especially in the West. So I will add that footnote as a reply to your question. And that's why I personally, as a sannyasi, generally speaking, I discourage people trying to accept sannyas unless and until it comes in a very natural way. And to be honest, I know a few people who who you can see from miles that they have that nature, and it's natural for them. It's not like an forced imposition, artificial imposition, right? But sometimes you can see the opposite also, right? And many times you see that when people accept sannyasa and kind of become a different person before and after accepting that order. So that's strange, right? Like, you're not supposed to now be someone different. I remember once I was talking a few years ago with a devotee who recently, a few years ago, accepted sannyasa in ISKCON. He's a relatively well-known sannyasa in ISKCON now. And he already knew he was going to accept sannyas. So I met with him in UK some years ago, and we met for the first time, and he asked me, "Oh, Maharaj, do you have any advice to give me for sannyas? You have been sannyas for 15 years. I'm about to accept sannyas." And again, I don't like to play like the elder sannyasi and will tell you what to do. But the only thing that came in the moment is like, just continue being who you are, right? Don't shift into another type of personality now whenever you accept sannyas. It's not that because you have an extra stick in your hand and an extra cloth around your neck, suddenly you became a superhero or who knows what, right? So yeah, I will add that footnote. But mostly the verse is referring to that particular type of sannyas, where all actions are basically renounced. And even if some people may do that, that will be just an exception to the rule. We have some famous examples that we may relate to this in some forms. At times we hear of Madhavendra Puri or others doing this Ajagara Vritti, which is kind of the bow of the snake, which the snake just lies on the ground and depends on Krishna and waits for whatever has to come, and if not, they won't like force any action, so to say. Don't take any initiative, just deeply trusting Krishna will provide. If he doesn't provide, he's inviting me to fast today or something like that. And here Trivikram Prabhu is commenting, how about the vesh of sannyas? Vesh means like the clothing. Seems like an external. Yeah, of course, it's an external. Of course, we have to dress somehow. We cannot go just by life naked. Of course, some people do. We have the stage of sannyas called Avadut Paramahamsa. You can just go by life in the way you came out of the womb, or maybe with a coping. So again, those are externals, and they can be adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance. No? So yeah, that's a relative detail. So there's place for some adjustment, like we've seen that has happened. No? I mean, technically speaking, even sannyas is an external, in one sense. In connection to the function of the soul, orders like sannyas, like any other order, is an upadhi. It's a secondary designation that may play a role for some time, like being a grihasta, identifying yourself as such. If you are married and have a family, you somehow need to identify with your role in the family to serve in that context. But again, at least for us, that will be, okay, I'm identifying with the role enough for me to be functional in that as a servant. But ultimately, for us, it converges into this servant attitude. So the same with sannyas. Okay, I'm a monk, I'm this, I'm that. But at the end of the day, that should be a secondary designation, right? I like to, these days, I've been thinking how, yeah, the best possible way, maybe we talked about that these days, or maybe in Austria, maybe somewhere, I don't recall when. But someone asks you, who are you? And we can say so many things. And one of them will be, as abstract as that sounds, it's very specific. You can reply as God replies in the Bible when he says who he is, who God is. I am who I am, right? It's very specific, very personal. I am who I am. No. And if you want to know who I am, then okay, we have to spend time together and get to know each other. But Because if I say I'm a man, I'm Argentinian, I'm a sannyasi, I'm an author, I'm whatever, still those are credentials or those are part of the CV or those are upadhis. No, at the end of the day, those do not speak fully about who you are. Of course, those things somehow speak about who you are, but there's something else apart those things. So we have to be careful not to, not to label, box others or ourselves just merely because of that. So that's a good way of answering. I like that. Who are you? I am who I am. So what's that? Well, if you are interested, let's invest the necessary time to discover what does it mean in every case, right? So, so yeah, that's a constant discernment of a Saragrahi in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's words, right? Separating principles from details, from form from substance. And even we may be using form, of course. There are so many forms. Forms can be facilitators, right? There's no need to reject all forms in the name of being an essence seeker. If you are actually an essentialist, forms also will play a role in that. The ultimate essentialist doesn't feel the need to reject anything, because that person can see how everything is connected to the essence, to the center. So we just need to know its role and purpose, its reach. Bhagavatam will say that saying Desha Kala Vibhaga Bit, means everyone is invited to become a knower of time, place, and circumstance. And a knower means someone who develops a discernment, time, place, and circumstance. What this particular time, place, and circumstance is inviting me to, how to, like today in the morning, someone asked me how to express unconditional love at any given time, place, and circumstance. And the very question includes the answer, in the sense that there's no final answer to that, because at any given time, place, and circumstance, we will find something different. So the discernment has to be there at every single chapter of our lives. No, what does it mean to be essential here? What are the details and the principles here? No? So that's invitation. So I hope that helps, Mayapur Sangam.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. And I just want to share, I booked my flight ticket to the UK today.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. We will see you there in a few weeks. Let's say weeks. Months sounds too late. So in a few weeks. Great. Thank you so much. And before going to the next question, I'm seeing Sam and Rasangi. Let's go to a breakthrough room for a few minutes. Why not? And let's share together some thoughts about what has been stirred in your heart by these thoughts that we just shared about renunciation and about discernment and place and circumstance, essentials, whatever comes. So I will be pausing the recording and inviting you to the breakout, breakthrough, and break open heart rooms. Oh, welcome you all back. And of course, I wish you've had an engaging sharing. So
not enough time.
You have to exercise conciseness, my friend. And I want you to live with that taste. That's a good symptom. Not enough time. You will have eternity to satisfy your thirst, and even that won't be enough. You will be thirsty for eternity. That's the arrangement. But we'll have more breakthrough rooms in a few minutes. So I hope that satisfies your appetite on some degree. So were you second, John, after Mayapur Sangan, or Sam raised his hand first?
I think Sam was second, and I think I was before Asangi, but my
Yeah, we'll go to Sam, then you, and then Rasangi, because every time we go through breakout rooms, the hands disappear. So let's invite Sam to unmute himself, and then we continue.
Okay, Hare Krishna, Maharaj, and so good to see everybody again. I have a question about the Brahmajyoti and the concept of impersonal liberation. and how when the soul achieves that form of liberation, it said that they can't, that they can only remain there for a certain amount of time, you know, in eternity, and then they have to then return to the cycle of samsara in the material world. So I was just wondering if you could clarify more on that, because I remember you saying something different to that, and I wanted to hear more about that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your question, Sam. And yeah, interesting, because in today's Saturday, on maybe if you have seen on Wednesday, we're having a podcast as part of our Free Radical podcast series with Swami Padmanabha. So he's a sannyasa from Ramakrishna order, and our conversation will be about Bhagavan and Brahman, personal and impersonal absolute, and the nature of these two paths and these two phases of the absolute, and whether we need to accept one or reject the other, accept both. Is there a hierarchy between the two, or the two of them are different phases of the same non-dual reality? And if we speak in terms of hierarchies, that happens from a particular perspective, and I won't spoil the whole podcast. I will stop there with that. But regard to your question, which is very related to your question, that's why I mentioned that. So impersonal liberation, sometimes called Sayuja Mukti in most technical terms, or Brahma Sayuja, or Ekatwa, or different words, Kaivalyam, etc. Sometimes, as you've rightly mentioned, some, we've heard, you have heard, I have heard, and probably many of you have heard, the notion that if you achieve that type of liberation, you can only remain there for so long, and then you have to fall down again, or you have to fall down, or you have to fall, whatever term you want to use. Sometimes that being explained as remaining there basically does not constitute the natural constitution, the natural function of the soul in loving service to God. So it's in somehow unnatural position. So there's no place for that eternally. We've heard that. So that's the thesis, right? And I would say mostly that's related to one verse of the Bhagavatam, which is happens to be in 10th canto, 2nd chapter, verse 32. Sometimes quote Jenye Aravindaksha Vimukta Maninas. That's the most important part of the verse. Tvayasya Bhabada Vishuddha Budaya Aruhya Krichina Paramparam Tata Patante Do Nadrita Jushmat Angdayaha, which basically is translated as some people may do tapasya austerities and they consider themselves to be liberated, but they fall from that position of imagined superiority, because they have no regard for the lotus feet of Bhagavan. So many times this verse is the main pramana, so to say, or evidence to say those who disregard bhakti, basically, and look for impersonal merging, let's put it that way, they eventually fall down. So there are a few things to say, to emphasize here. That verse, first of all, is not speaking about those who attained liberation, but those who, as the verse says, are bimukta manina, which means who consider themselves manina, who think of themselves as bimukta, as liberated. They fall down from their position of supposed liberation. Why? Because they somehow commit offense against bhakti. In other words, they may think bhakti is not ultimately real, Bhagavan is not ultimately real, the soul is not ultimately real. The only real thing is Brahman, but ultimately there is no personal God, no individual soul, no loving interaction. All that is Maya. So Bhagavatam concludes, for those who think like that and who think themselves liberated, they basically, by thinking like that, that shows that they are not liberated. Let's put it that way. So that's very different from someone who actually accepts that one can relate to Bhagavan, to that face of the Absolute through bhakti, but chooses to merge into Brahman. And that's so while acknowledging that bhakti and Bhagavan are a possibility, and by not offending bhakti in that way, that person can attain what we call Brahma Sayuja. So that, I hope the idea is clear so far. So there is a clear difference in how we can read this verse. No? One thing is, you consider yourself as liberated, but you are not actually liberated. And you offend bhakti, probably in an immature, fanatical, exclusivistic way. Only my path is true. Only Brahman is real. All this idea of Bhagavan and loving relationship is a byproduct of illusion. So that in itself is aparad, because aparad means to go against love. So if just to say bhakti is not real, bhakti means love. So to say love is not real is aparad. You are going against love, basically. You are denying the existence of love ultimately, because love requires two, at least, an interaction. There's a mutuality, reciprocity. And if we embrace a very extreme form of Advaita Vedanta, where you even reject other possibilities in transcendence and say everything you ultimately becomes reduced to Brahman. That's a form of, not acknowledging the possibility of love, individuality, and so on. But those who acknowledge, you can love Bhagavan. There is one of the faces of the Absolute. The Bhagavatam says, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, so many forms of Bhagavan and so on. But my cup of tea is Brahman, Nirvishesh Brahman, attributeless Brahma. I want to enter into that homogeneous experience in Brahman. Okay, that's a possibility, and there is no fall from there. Why? Because it's mukti. It's one of the 5 types of mukti. Mukti, by definition, Bhagavatam defines mukti. Muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyabhyashtitihi. Mukti means you are devoid of all false designations. So if you are devoid of all designation, how can you fall from there? What can make you fall? And if something is by definition called mukti, there is no falling from mukti. Mukti means liberation, a liberated state. So if I fall from liberation, I cannot call that liberation in the first place. No. By definition, mukti implies a permanent situation in transcendence. No, that we can define it that way. Mukti equals permanent situation in transcendence. So freedom from, John is asking, freedom from false designations, basically, false sense of identity, temporary, and swarupena vyabhyastitihi, to be fully established in one's swarup. And by swarup, I don't mean here a devotional identity in the lila necessarily, but just in who you are as an Atman. In the context of bhakti, that will include the potential of the Atman in terms of love, but in Brahman, the Atman is free from false designations and identify with that face of the Absolute. So by definition, you cannot fall from mukti. So when we say that someone falls from Brahman, actually, it's referring to this verse that I quote. You are not actually falling from that level of realization, but you may not have attained that level of realization, and then you fall, quote unquote, from whatever level you are by offending bhakti. So that's basically the caution. While pursuing one particular flavor or window of opportunity in spirituality, be careful not to diminish other paths. Basically, that's kind of the spirit of this section, right? Whether you are pursuing Brahman, whether you are pursuing Bhagavan, whether you are pursuing God in one face or another, watch out not to play out any superiority complex and try to just diminish everyone else or even cancel out everyone else and reduce everything and everyone to your own chosen path, no? Because that's basically reductionistic and can become a form of religious fundamentalism. Very narrow-minded, only my path is true, without acknowledging we are here dealing with the infinite, right? So how much can I claim exclusive, how to say? Yeah, right. I'm threading the only one path, and this is the only. You're dealing with the infinite. How much you can colonize the infinite? How much we can claim this is the only way to the infinite? I mean, by definition, saying that is an oxymoron. Makes no sense, right? This is the only possible way to address the infinite. I mean, it makes no sense to say that. You're talking about the infinite. So the infinite means there are infinite ways to address the infinite. Oh. And it's such a tragedy. I mean, it's a tragic comedy, right? Like in every single tradition, you will find people who say, this is the one and only path to the infinite. So we need just to go back to that single sentence and play out the implications of that. No? And then if you find people from every tradition saying the same, and they will have their own verses to quote, right? Okay, Jesus is the way, the light, the life, whatever. And someone will say, well, Krishna says in the Gita, abandon all religion and just surrender to me. And I'm sure everyone can bring their own lines. And the fact that everyone has their own lines to justify that actually speaks about how all of those traditions are pointing in the same direction. So those statements should create union rather than division and fight. Who of those exact same lines is the actual bona fide one? No, the fact that everyone is saying the same thing proves that we are all addressing the same reality with different names from different angles. So instead of bringing further division and conflict, it should bring more union and communion. So yeah, again, in our particular tradition, that may not be our cup of tea, impersonal Brahman, but it's a face of the absolute. It's mentioned and acknowledged in the Bhagavatam. There are many sections in our tradition prescribing methodologies to achieve that realization. So we have to be careful. We are dealing with the infinite, with the absolute. So whether we have a preferred flavor of approach, we should be very delicate and careful not to diminish or cancel every other approach which is not in our masala, so to say. And that sounds very simple and basic, but we have to pay very close attention how we feel internally when we are confronted with different ways of doing that. No, again, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur will beautifully say, if you are in a mosque or in a church or in some temple from other traditions, sister tradition, or you are confronted with a different way of approaching the infinite, you should think, oh, how interesting how they are approaching my Krishna. Not from any egoic place, but like, oh, how cute. No, how cute that they call my Krishna this way and they worship. It's not my cup of tea, but I can relate to the cuteness in that. some form of positive appreciation, right? I think that's important, and that can shed light back on our own tradition. Jogamaya is asking, why do they say it is spiritual suicide? Well, it's of course those are strong words, but basically they refer to the fact that in Brahman you don't have a sense of personal individuality. Basically, that's the point. So we should be able to understand the words without maybe the historical baggage that is attached to those words, which I can understand, and that's why I personally choose not to use them, because quickly they may sound derogatory, right? Like, okay, they are killing themselves while we are not. We are becoming more and more alive. It's just in that context, and that's basically the main theme of my conversation with Swami Padmanabha on Wednesday. Like, because he wrote the whole article saying, okay, Gaudiya Vaishnavas are hierarchical and say that, and I'm not criticizing him by this, I'm just making the point. they create an what's his expression? Asymmetrical ontological dependence. Like they say, Bhagavan is ontologically higher than Brahman. Not two faces of the same absolute, but there is a hierarchy there. And he disagrees with that. And I try to make the point, the hierarchy is there, but when observed through the lens of rasa vichar. From tattva vichar, which means impartial, metaphysical, ontological analysis, Brahman and Bhagavan are not higher one than the other because both are faces of the same non-dual absolute. But when we analyze the situation from rasa vichar, from the consideration of loving interaction, yes, Bhagavan is higher because Bhagavan facilitates the experience of loving interaction. Brahman does not. But of course, we could say, if you will see the whole thing through the lenses of homogeneous non-differentiatedness, then Brahman is higher because it offers that particular experience, which is not our cup of tea, but it's there. So again, there's a place to speak in this way and to harmonize this and not feel the necessity of condemning or diminishing one another, but just have the maturity to engage, to engage with the different facets of the absolute. So that will be, in my understanding, how to approach the things again. So I hope that helps. Sam, what do you think?
Yes, yeah, very much so. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. My pleasure. Okay, since we have a few more questions, sometimes as you know, I'll skip a few breakthrough rooms. So I'll skip this one. If you allow me, Sam, no problem. Okay, so we'll go to the next question and then we'll go to a breakthrough room. So the next one will be John. Let's respect the order and then we'll go to Rasangi. I'm not forgetting you guys. So you can unmute yourself, John, and bring your offering to the table. Welcome.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The question kind of came to mind earlier today for me, and it's somehow related to the previous question. Specifically, again, it's about hierarchy within rasa, and how the question came to me is the difference in feeling of a sort of peace. And in the Christian practice, they talk of peace of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I feel that as something sort of universal, though I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to define it for everybody else. But anyway, a feeling of peace within Gaudiya Vaishnavism, aesthetic Vedanta, we have this expression Shantaras versus something within the other rasas, like for Gaudiya specifically, seemed mostly focus on Madhurya. The theology focuses on Madhurya Ras in some ways. And we seem to have a hierarchy. I guess maybe I'll put the question this way. Who the heck would want the suffering of Vipralamba within Madhurya Ras when you could just have peace? It seems crazy. It seems like the spiritual suicide thing, it seems pretty crazy when you could have peace or you could have all of the heart-wrenching suffering of being in love. Why do we make that? Why do we take that gambit? That's just crazy. I don't know. I don't know how else to put it, but it's intriguing and it's also terrifying.
Thank you for your honesty, John. So the question is basically, why the heck, right? That sounds the question in its essence. So thank you for that. And of course, there are a few things to share. And I'm glad that somehow the questions is connected to the previous one, so we can In the breakthrough room, we can explore related topics. So similar, again, continue with my thoughts connected to Sam's question. We have these hierarchies in different ways, but again, those are from a perspective of certain type of experience, no? So something more subjective, as I like to give the example. Someone may say, objectively speaking, mango is the sweetest fruit, or maybe some other fruit, whatever is objectively has been scientifically proved is the fruit which contains more sugar. Let's put it that way. And someone may say, okay, that's the sweetest, but that's not my favorite, right? Someone may say, I like apples the most. They're not the sweetest, but that's my favorite. So in the same way, we could say, okay, Madhurya Rasa, in terms of romantic love, Madhurya means sweet. We could say, okay, that's the relationship that contains the most sweetness. And we will go to a moment to the notion of vipralambha and suffering and sweet suffering. But again, someone may say, that's too sweet for me. That feels like spiritual diabetes for me. Too much sweet. So it's fine. There are other options at the table. And again, why we feel like that, we cannot give a final verdict. Different previous experiences, some scars for sure. We still are a soul with free will. There is agency there, so we decide. But sometimes our decisions are also informed by previous experiences. So I can see that, of course, someone who is coming from a very tortured background, let's put some hypothetical extreme scenario, that person will like, just give me peace, right? I just want to stop suffering. I'm so much overwhelmed with pain. And that's what Krishna acknowledges in the Bhagavad Gita when he says 4 types of people come to me. And the main group are the afflicted ones, the ones who do not want to suffer anymore. And he says, I welcome them. They're welcome to join the table. Even some other people may want money from me, may want knowledge from me, may do not want me, right? Krishna acknowledges that. No? They come to me not for the sake of myself. They come to me for the sake of their own relief. No? Try to get the point also, right? I mean, if I just approach God for my own peace, okay, that makes sense at some point, but I will say in any material relationship, at one point you are concerned with giving someone something to the other person also. It's not just give me peace, give me peace, give me peace, give me peace, give me peace. So what happens when you have that peace? Are you willing to give something back? And of course, Santa Rasa has to do something with that. It's all about, in big part, peace. There is no so much like an active service disposition, but the devotee still is having a loving contemplation of God. So in that form, there is a form of reciprocity. There is an appreciation, beatific vision sometimes that may be called, like an inner, favorable, positive, grateful, loving contemplation of the reality of God. Santa Rasa. Again, that may be the main Gaudiya Vaishnava cup of tea. It's described by Rupa Goswami. Again, it's acknowledged in the spectrum of relationships, so it's not entirely condemned. And then we have, of course, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya, all these other options. And again, remember, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami will say, every devotee feels their approach to the divine is the best, and everyone is correct. So we have that non-sectarian foundation of acceptance of these possibilities. Yes, we will say the specialty of Gaudiya Vaishnavism may be in connection to romantic love, though that's not the only possibility. But I will say every tradition has their own speciality, though they may have more than one possibility, because also if you go to mystical Christianity, you have some erotic component if you go to the Song of Songs. Now you have some ideas of fraternal love in terms of conception of Jesus as a friend. You have the worship of Jesus as a child. In Italy, I've been there, it's filled with the Bambino images, no? and Mary and the Bambino and Madonna. no, the sacred mother and the child. I mean, it's everywhere, those paintings, like Krishna and Yashoda, right? You have those paintings with Krishna and Yashoda is kind of the Vaishnava version of. So you have this beatific contemplation. So we have all these rasas in other traditions as well. So this is there. So that's another part of my thoughts. And in connection to the what the heck part of the question, how someone could possibly choose to suffer in separation while eternal peace is on the menu. Well, again, for some, peace is not the all in all. For people, peace, how to say, some people may be interested in deep, passionate love. And it's interesting because and I don't want to make a full parallel between our current experience of that here, but it's parallel enough for us to understand that, right? Many of us may be a little bit exhausted by some relationships and even loving romantic experiences in this world, but most people feel drawn to that. So there is a component there of emotional intensity and investment and passion that is drawing us, even if we still fail miserably in that arena. But we can get a glimpse for that about, okay, there is something here. If it's expressed in its most virtuous way, it will be probably very different from my experience now. So my point is this: when we hear about, and that's why we need to be careful about this, when we hear about the suffering in separation in the romantic lila of Radha and Krishna, let's be honest, guys, we have no clue what's that about. We probably are just projecting what we understand by suffering. So until and unless we've learned to suffer in love, which that's the actual suffering, if we are not suffering in the context of love, actually we are not suffering in the real sense of the term. It's not a growing suffering, a sweet suffering, an expanding suffering that expands our consciousness. So that's why I will say there's that cautionary note, right? Proportionately to how much we've learned to suffer in love, we can approach this reality of divine separation and suffering. Because if we just rush into that without being properly grounded here in our suffering, loving suffering, compassionate suffering, it may be just projection. And of course, in projection, we misconstrue what's going on the other side, and we may have a wrong picture and think, I don't want that. That's undesirable. Like many people have different wrong pictures. Some people think Krishna is it's how to say, like an immoral womanizer god in the worst sense of the term. And there are people who have taken devotees to the court, saying you are worshiping an immoral god who has so many lovers who are married to other people. So again, they are projecting their own ideas about all that. So that's why we need not only to be educated in theory about what do we mean by suffering and how it is possible for it to exist, a paradoxical suffering which is at the same time sweet. How suffering can make me grow, how suffering can expand my consciousness, chitta vistar. How can there be an expansion of consciousness in suffering? And we have to have experiential grounding in all that. And that may take time, and it's okay. We are not here judging anyone. But as long as that experience is lacking, we are advised not to get into the details of the suffering in transcendence, because we may misconstrue. No? Krishnadas Gauriya say, Bahir Bistu Ajalaha Vitare Anandamoy Krishna Prema Adbhuta Charit. The astonishing qualities of divine love is that on the outside, it seems like poison, no? Like dying in separation from one another. It's poison. It's killing them. Stop that, please. Bring some peace. But Vitare Ananda more. Inside, the nature of that is full of bliss and ecstasy. So it's paradoxical because, but you say, but what do you mean? They are dying. I can see them, and but we don't know what's going on the inside. So it's very confusing, arguably so. It's paradoxical. So that's why we need to be more and more, all of us, trained about integration of complexity and paradoxical thinking, and be more and more accustomed to coexist with apparent contradictions. No, how suffering can be sweet. Again, we may need to stay with that question for a few years, right? How is possible sweet suffering? How? And it's like a koan, right? You need to stay with that, and there are no easy answers, but gradually that will take us to another level where we can accommodate what before seemed impossible to accommodate. The possibility of sweet suffering. So yeah, I will say that, and in that sense, it is said sometimes that the intensity of loving, let's say romantic love, somehow includes the experiences of the previous ones. So it's not that it has no peace. That's a way of saying also that. It's not like, oh, on one side you have the peace of Shantarasa and all these guys in romantic love lack absolute peace and they're absolutely disturbed and agitated. No. That peace is somehow paradoxically included in the heart-wrenching experience of separation. So again, we have to recalibrate our way of understanding how peace can be included there. It seems they have no peace, but it's there somehow, plus something else. So again, it's not an easy thing to understand. Now, Krishna Lila we shouldn't take that for granted, even though we may know all these stories by heart. The emotional components and dynamics, and that's whatever is being played out in those interactions. We need to enter there. No, that's like Prabhupada said once, right? He said someone was asking too many questions about the Lila, and he said, why you don't go there and find it for yourself? Or Bhaktivinoda Thakur will say, certain things are only solved in samadhi. No, like you need to enter into trans-rational mode of thinking, whatever word we may like to use, into deep meditation, and then we will be able to accommodate what we cannot possibly accommodate otherwise. So that's a big challenge of when we need to say, okay, stop thinking now. At some point, it's think as much as you can, but at one point, it's like, okay, I need to put pause, and I need to enter trans-rational experiential knowledge by prayer, by opening my heart, by opening to other details. And Bhadra is commenting here about her Siksha Gurudev Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, and how he's spoken in great detail about distinction, but sameness between viraha and sambhog, separation and union. And of course, again, in Sanskrit, the words, again, it's paradoxical. Srila Maharaj will speak about union in separation. There's a type of union in separation. Again, it's paradoxical. The word in Sanskrit, one of the words for separation is biyoga. And biyoga can mean without, bina yoga, without union. Also, the B can mean vishesha rupa yoga, a special form of union. And we have glimpses of that here. If we are separated from a beloved, in one sense, we are suffering in their absence, but it takes us to internalize our feelings for that person. Internally, they become more condensed. So it has its own sweetness. And that, of course, augments the joy of the union. Because if there's no separation, there's no reunion, literally. I mean, there's no possibility of the experience of reunion if there's no separation. So those are kind of the dynamics, low tide, high tide, of love. It's back and forth, dynamics. A few thoughts. I hope that helps, John. But you can continue saying, what the heck? It's okay. It's part of the process. Many things to think about that. So I'll send you for a few minutes to the breakthrough rooms. And we'll continue examining whatever you may like to share regarding what we've been talking in these two last answers, whatever comes. And we'll meet each other in a few more minutes again. Okay, there we are back. Let me have darshan of your faces after sharing with one another. Beautiful, blossoming sunflowers. Thank you for opening yourself to this online social experiment, breakthrough rooms. Okay, we have a few more minutes, and Rasangi has raised her digital hand some minutes ago, so we'll invite her to unmute herself and bring her offering to conclude our meeting today.
So first I want to say, I really like your format for your classes with more interactive this time. And I love that. I love that there was so much involvement and contribution. Although I would love if they each had a microphone and we could actually hear their questions more clearly. Really, really, really. I want to hear every word.
We're trying our best, Rasangi, please.
I know, I'm just, do you need some Lakshmi to buy a microphone for this purpose? I'm just thinking.
So it's too difficult, Rasangi. I travel with a small luggage. I cannot bring 15 microphones for each person in the class.
Oh, I get so frustrated because I want to hear them.
Yeah,
I feel connected.
It's part of the separation. You have to have some longing and separation. That's part of the sweet suffering.
That's very cute. Thank you, Maharaj.
My pleasure.
Very cute. And when I think about when you mentioned before about the cuteness of other people's worship, like my heart swells when I hear the devotion of I've told you this, the worship music. Yeah. My eyes feel, it's not just cute, I'm moved to tears.
Yeah, that's more than cute. Yeah.
I know. And the fact that I let that in is mind-blowing, because I would never do that before. But now I'm so happy to say and enriched by these people's love and devotion. And yeah, I'm just saying that. So my question is, I want to tell you, I'm loving this book, and something you said here on page 40, I think it is, or is it 41, is a game changer. It's a freaking game changer for me in my devotional life. The fact that that Krishna is needy, that he's needy, just melts my heart.
It's cute, right?
And I know I've been hearing this for years, probably, but I kind of get it now. I read this to my son this morning, the whole passage, we discussed it. It's such a different conception, Maharaj, than this scary, punitive, judgmental God, the God of the Jews and the judge and jury. It's so different. And every time I think of it, it brings me into my heart. And I would love you to talk a little bit more about God's neediness, because it's just so, I love it. It's just so wonderful. So thank you for bringing that up.
My pleasure. And of course, it's not my invention or my creation, right? I try to show that that's part of our tradition. And yeah, we can also find scary descriptions of the divine in our tradition and in other traditions, which basically seem to say, okay, different people relate to different languages and ideas of God. And at times, some people need that authority figure for whatever reason, but that's not necessarily the ultimate word, final word about the divine. No? So we have all these different ways of conceiving God, right? And again, some of them are hyper, ultra intimate. And for some people, that may also be too much. And again, we are not condemning them. No? Like again, Brihad Bhagavatamrita is sharing that very liberally. Like in the journey of Gopakumar, I always like to go back to that template, which again, remember, Brihad Bhagavatamrita is the the very first book of our Gaudiya Sampradaya. So somehow it sets the tone for what we are about. And that shows the interfaith cosmic journey of Gopakumar, being confronted with so many traditions, faiths, moods of love. I'm seeing the cuteness of each one of those. But him having his own call for considerable intimacy. And as we know, at one point he's in Vaikuntha, where too much intimacy is not the cup of tea of the people there. And Gopakumar sees Narayan and he shouts Gopal and runs to embrace Narayan. So everyone in Vaikuntha is scandalized. Like, how you dare to, first of all, call God Gopal? No, it's counterintuitive for them. And run and try to embrace God. What do you mean by that? Now, for most of them, it's out of the menu. Now, embracing God on a daily basis. But for Gopakumar, was like, obviously, we will embrace. No, as friends, you embrace with each other. But so again, but Sanatana Goswami is not condemning the mood of Vaikuntha, nor Gopakumar, who is himself forbidden from that embrace. But he actually can appreciate, oh, okay, they relate to my Gopal in a different way, and he honors that. It's not that he's saying, oh, these guys in Vaikuntha know nothing about the real thing. He's just acknowledging, okay, we enjoy a different masala here, each one of us, and there's place for that. So yeah, the notion of a needy God, and I am using that word needy purposefully with some intention, of course. I know it can sound a little shocking because sometimes we use the word needy in a negative context. No, oh, you are so needy, right? But again, we are trying to balance in those same sections by, okay, we also acknowledge God is self-satisfied. So again, we go back to this paradoxical thinking. He's self-satisfied, he's Atmaram in the context of love. He doesn't need anything outside of love, but love creates its own necessities. Remember, prem prayojan. Prayojan means necessity. So prem is the ultimate necessity. Once attained, prem creates its own sort of necessities. Inside love, there is no other necessity but love, apart from love. But inside love, there's an endless array of newer and newer neediness in love. So when something happens in love, a few minutes ago, we were talking about suffering. So as long as suffering is happening in the context of love, it's holy, it's sacred. As long as neediness is happening in the concept of genuine love, it's not codependence or whatever other type of lacking, undesirable, but it's very desirable. This famous verse from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, since we spoke about that, which I like to quote quite often, maybe it's my favorite verse, and basically Sanatana Goswami says there that when Krishna is willing to, how to say, to put on the side his self-satisfaction, his side as Atmaram, and becomes obsessed with satisfying his devotees, again, that means neediness in love, that's the ultimate expression of his godhood. Oh, that's a very interesting set of ideas there, right? The ultimate for us, of course, from our Gaudiya darshan, from our Gaudiya point of view, the ultimate face of God is what he's become sublimated by love. Right? Which sounds counterintuitive because, again, the ultimate face of God has to be the all-conquering, powerful, cosmic administrator. No, here you have someone rolling at the feet of Radha and crying for mercy and in utter neediness and dying in separation of her, and so on and so forth. So again, this is the paradox. The ultimate face of God is such a face that all the usual ideas of God do not apply there somehow. We are seeing God beyond God at this point. No? Krishna is God beyond God. That's why I like to say God is an aspect of Krishna. Not Krishna is an aspect of God. God is an aspect of Krishna. Right? That's why Prabhupada say the supreme personality of Godhead. We have Godhead, then we have Godhead with personality, then we have the supreme personality of Godhead. And we can continue with the supreme personality of Krishna, that's Mahaprabhu, but that's another conversation. So I think, yeah, there is a charm, there is a cuteness, there is an attraction in seeing, okay, God is needy, God is vulnerable, in other words, right? That's what we refer to in radical personalism. We worship a vulnerable God, a God that is, wounded by the arrows of Cupid, if we want to use poetic language. A God that is begging at the feet of love. A God that is willing to acknowledge his depth of love, as we were sharing some days ago in Austria. And I remember when we were talking about that, almost everyone was in tears. And we were mentioning how Krishna feels so indebted by even the smallest but genuine, sincere act of service from his devotees. Like when Draupadi is calling him, Govinda, Govinda, while being disrobed in the Kuru's assembly. And Krishna, after providing endless sari, he tells Draupadi, that cry when you call me out loud has created in my heart a depth that I find no end to that. I cannot repay back that depth. The sincerity of your call has created an endless, unpayable depth in my heart. So that's the God we adore. Again, I won't say even worship, adore. That's adorable. Not only worshipable, distance, or reverence, adorable. Someone who is so humble, so grateful. Like we were talking the other day, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, Krishna feels grateful in advance for all the services we can offer to him in potential. We haven't offered any of that, but he already feels gratitude for all that he knows we could offer in potential. He's feeling grateful for us, for the things we haven't offered yet. So that's too much, right? Generally, we cannot think that someone can be so grateful, so generous, so loving. So that's too good to be true. But that's the actual reality. That's the actual truth. So all these ideas force us to open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of such a being, such an ideal person to exist and to develop real hope. Because the ultimate hope has to be in relation to such a prospect, to those things that in the beginning they sound unbelievable. I cannot believe that. That's too much. That's interesting because we use the word unbelievable in a positive way also, like, wow, that's unbelievable. But it can have its negative thing, like it's unbelievable. I cannot believe in that. It's impossible to believe. It's too good to be true. But it's unbelievable in the good sense of the term. Someone so sweet, so intimate, so grateful, so humble, so generous. That's the only possible God. That's the only coherent definition of an actual sweet absolute. It must make sense in that regard. And our hope and our trust and our faith has to be developed on the foundation of such a definition of God. Not any smaller definition than that. Our faith shouldn't be satisfied with anything less but the most deep and generous possible conception of who the divine is. So many times we have problems with faith, with our faith, not because of faith itself, but because we have a very small idea of God. So we have problems having faith in that because the idea is too small. We are conceiving a very narrow God. So of course our faith doesn't work that well, but not because of faith itself, but our own faith is demanding a deeper, broader, more accurate, more realistic conception of the divine that actually makes sense to the idea of what an all-attractive God is. When we say Krishna is the all-attractive, he must be all-attractive in every possible way. His humility must be the most attractive possible humility. He has to be so generous, so grateful, to the point that he becomes irresistibly attractive. No? If we don't reach that point, then we are not doing our task. Krishna continues to become more and more irresistibly attractive and more generous and humble and all that stuff, but we need to play out the implications of what it means, all that. And according to that, Srila Siddhartha Maharaj will say, you are judged by your ideal. So we have to have a proper ideal, a proper conception. What's our ideal? I was reading the other day, I think it was Rumi, and he says, judge a moth by the candle the moth is attracted to. You judge a moth by the light he's attracted. In other words, there's different lights, there are different ideals. And according to the ideal we are pursuing, and we may be saying, we have the Gaudiya Vaishnava ideal. Yeah, but what idea do you have about that ideal? Still, we may have very beautiful, subscribe to a very beautiful tradition and have very narrow-minded conception of the all attractive, which is not attractive at all. Or it's attractive, but not as attractive as it actually is. So that's why we need, guidance and nourishing. So we really contact the actual all attractive. So if that hasn't happened so far, then we shouldn't rest, and we have to continue moving forward till we meet reality for what it is. Bhagavad Gita as it is, the sweet absolute as the sweet absolute is, right? That's our duty, our part as seekers, as searchers, to continue playing out the implications of all this till actually Krishna becomes irresistibly attractive. Bhajaniya guna vishishta, Srila Siddhartha Maharaj will say. He is of such nature that when you contact his attributes, you become irresistibly attracted to dedicate yourself in that direction. There's no other option. It's too attractive. Again, too much, too sweet, too generous, too grateful, too loving. We cannot rest until we have an experiential glimpse of that. Not to make anyone feel any pressure, but just to make, sorry if I became a little bit too intense, but that's how it is. It's a gradual journey at the same time, but at the same time, it's an ongoing journey. So we shouldn't be complacent and be satisfied with anything less but all that is actually available for us. And that's how our journey continues to grow. That's what we mean by ever evolving and evolution in divine love. Right? So, yeah. And that's all connected to what we spoke the other day in Austria about anartha-nivritti, right? Deconstructing false values and being very careful that our idea of the all attractive is actually all attractive and remains all attractive, every time more attractive, and so on and so forth, right? So anyhow, some thoughts for Sangi?
That was good. You know what really got me? It just got me that Krishna wants my love too. He really wants my love. He wants all of our love, unlimitedly needy, right? And the fact that the way you describe in that sentence, though completed every moment, there is yet a need born from God's inner fullness to express itself in celebration of that fullness, which leads in turn to an even fuller expression of himself to be celebrated. This is mind-boggling.
That's the idea. That's the idea, that your mind explodes, of course.
Oh yeah, it's totally exploding. But that love, and you can see how it happens forever. His beauty and love is so big, it increases the love of the other, and then it just goes on forever. It's
wonderful, right? It's full of wonder. It's awesome, full of awe. No? The other day we came to that conclusion, just to conclude this part, in Austria. Like Taittiriya Upanishad says, Raso Vaisaha. The absolute is rasa. Rasa means sacred rapture. And then says Rasa Sar Chamatkar. The essence of rasa is astonishment and wonder. So God is rasa, sacred rapture, and the essence of sacred rapture is wonder. Therefore, God is wonder. The essence of the divine is wonder. a constant experience of wonder for himself, for us in relationship to him, for him in relationship to us. Ultimately, in every possible direction, there is an ongoing experience of wonder. And again, we cannot get there with our limited minds. So it's good that our minds are exploding. That's a good symptom. We need a bigger vessel to contain such currents. So that's a good symptom. We use our faculties as much as we can till they collapse in a sacred way. And that gives us a glimpse of the need for further grace to craft a more broad, deep, powerful vessel to hold and honor the descent of divine grace. So let's put the discussion to rest here, but I will send you one more time, a few more minutes, if you have time, to breakthrough rooms. One more breakthrough, a few more minutes. Share your hearts with one another, pour generosity and gratitude, and feed each other, spoon fed each one of you with grace and realization for a few minutes, and then we'll return to our final goodbye for today. Okay, again, very glad to see your enlightened faces, both Ayant Parashpara, again, enlightening one another, what best way to show our affection and our love. So thank you so much for sharing your affection and love with me, by your presence, enlightening presence for sure, questions, attention, open inquiries. So glad to see you all, and just saying goodbye till very soon. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaudiya Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Bol, Vancha Kalpataru Vishta Kripa Sindhu Piya Vacha, Titanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.